When a woman starts to change, it almost never happens all at once. What's interesting is that those changes, though they might seem insignificant, say more than any words could. She may keep smiling, keep talking to you, even keep telling you that everything's fine, but her energy is no longer where it used to be. It's subtle, but it's real. And the man who doesn't learn to read those shifts ends up confused, trying to justify signs that no longer lie. What's most unsettling is that, many times, those changes don't come from anger, but from the silent appearance of another man, someone who sparks curiosity, contrast, or simply a different feeling. Every man goes through that moment when he senses something has changed, but can't quite explain it. She's not as available anymore, she doesn't act the same, and inside him begins a mix of doubt, anxiety, and wounded pride. It's easy to fall into the trap of reacting, demanding, or trying to win her back with more attention, but that only speeds up the inevitable. The truth is, each of those changes has a deep psychological meaning, and understanding it not only protects you from pain, it elevates your emotional intelligence, because when you understand what's happening inside her, you can act from calm, not from need. If this is your first time here, my name is Celia. I help men understand female psychology from a mature, conscious perspective, without games or masks, so they can learn to read signals, hold their frame, and build high-value connections. I invite you to subscribe and stay until the end, because in this video, you'll not only discover the 5 clearest changes a woman shows when there's another man involved, but also the 2 keys that will help you keep your power even in the middle of emotional chaos. Let's begin. When another man enters a woman's emotional radar, the first thing that fractures isn't her love, it's her attention. At first, everything seems the same, but if you watch closely, you'll notice her presence becomes intermittent. She used to reply quickly, now she pauses. She used to look at you with a focus that felt exclusive, now her gaze drifts, as if part of her were somewhere else. It's not a conscious strategy, it's biology and emotion. The female mind can't give full focus to 2 emotional stimuli at the same time. When a new man appears, her brain starts distributing emotional energy, and it shows in the small details that once seemed automatic. As we've seen before, women don't change without reason. Every internal shift has meaning. In this case, that meaning translates to curiosity. It doesn't necessarily mean infidelity or betrayal, but rather a stage of evaluation. She begins to observe whether what she feels with you holds up against what she perceives in the other man. Her attention, which once belonged to you by default, is now being compared. And that can be devastating if you're not ready, because the man who realizes it too late often reacts from anxiety, asking questions, trying to control, or attempting to reclaim the place he feels he's lost. What matters is not to take this change as an offense, but as a signal. Attention is the first form of energy a woman gives. If she stops giving it, it's not out of hate, but because something inside her is seeking novelty or validation. The common mistake is trying to make up for that distance with more messages, more questions, or more insistence. And that, instead of drawing her back, only confirms to her that you've lost control. To restore balance, don't chase her attention. Bring it back to yourself. When you notice her focus starting to split, make the most counterintuitive move. Withdraw yours. Not out of pride, but out of self-respect. Women read energy better than words. If she feels your world keeps spinning steadily, even without her gaze, her mind will compare that emotional impact, and the balance begins to shift again. What many men forget is that a woman's attention isn't won through pleading, but through presence. If she sees that you don't crumble when her focus changes, she starts to see you again as a steady point amid the chaos. And that steadiness, more than any speech, reignites attraction and respect. So, the first lesson is this: don't fight for her attention. Whoever chases it, loses it. Learn to recognize when it divides and respond with calm, because within that calm lies the reflection of your true worth. That said, let's move on to another sign that's just as revealing, but even more silent. After her attention starts to fragment, the next thing that shifts is the way she communicates. It's no longer about what she says, but about what she stops saying. A woman who once shared everything with you, Her thoughts, fears, daily routines starts to grow quiet about certain things. She doesn't vanish overnight, she simply filters. She talks about surface-level topics, avoids deep or emotional conversations, and answers with shorter, flatter responses. It's the emotional equivalent of turning down the volume on her connection with you, not because she wants to hurt you, but because, unconsciously, she's protecting her emotional world while she observes what's happening with the new presence in her mind. We've already seen that her attention splits when curiosity about another man arises. Now, in this stage, that curiosity turns into reserve. She starts to measure what she shares and with whom. It's an energetic change more than a verbal one. The conversations lose emotional intimacy. Before, her communication with you was expansive. She opened the door to her inner world. Now, she retreats into a kind of calculated discretion. She's not necessarily hiding something, but she's holding back what might expose her vulnerability. In her mind, she's recalibrating trust. A common mistake many men make is trying to pull information out of her. They ask more questions, apply pressure, want to know what's wrong, why she's distant, what's going on. But every attempt to force dialogue produces the opposite effect. She shuts down even more. A woman opens up when she feels calm and retreats when she senses tension or interrogation. So if you notice her answers getting shorter or her tone losing emotion, don't confront, observe. Female communication mirrors her emotional state. When her interest fluctuates, her words reveal it before her actions do. There's something that separates a mature man from an impulsive one. The mature man doesn't look for explanations, he looks for patterns. If you detect that her way of communicating with you has changed, take it as a sign that there's more going on beneath the surface. Evaluate without paranoia, but with clarity. Remember, communication is the thermometer of connection. If the temperature drops, yelling at the thermometer won't help. You have to understand what's cooling the room. The solution isn't to talk more, but to listen differently. Learn to read what her silence says. Sometimes her silence says, "I'm comparing." Other times it says, "I need space to think." In either case, your role isn't to chase answers, but to maintain your emotional center. That stability is the only way to keep your frame without losing your dignity. When you can stay calm in the face of her selectiveness, she realizes she can't manipulate you with ambiguity, and that sparks respect. Because a woman may doubt her feelings, but never a man who stays grounded even when she wavers. And right there, when you learn to stay balanced through her silence, the next sign appears. The change in her image, the visible reflection of her inner transformation. When a new man enters a woman's emotional horizon, her image almost always becomes the first battleground within her. Suddenly, she starts caring more about how she looks, changes her clothing style, touches up her hair, adopts a new fragrance, or puts effort into her appearance, even in situations where she didn't before. Those details that seem trivial are actually deep signs of an inner realignment. A woman changes her appearance when she wants to reconnect with a version of herself that makes her feel desired again. It's not always a conscious act. Sometimes it's her subconscious trying to regain her glow under a new gaze. Up to now, we've understood that first her attention divides, and then her communication becomes selective. What follows is visible, the external transformation. Every change in her style carries emotional intent. It's not just vanity, it's a search for identity. When she feels another man's influence, she begins to see herself through different eyes, questioning what she projects, what she attracts, and what no longer does. It's her way of evaluating not only him, but herself. And while many men interpret this as provocation or an attempt to get attention, the truth is it's a declaration of emotional independence. The biggest mistake a man can make at this stage is to confront or criticize her change. If you say things like, "You're dressing up more than before," "You don't dress the same anymore," or "Who are you trying to impress?" you'll only make her close off even more. A woman who feels the need to validate herself again is exploring a reflection that makes her feel alive. Attacking her for that pushes her further away, but observing it calmly and without judgment places you on a higher level of self-control. This shift in her image also reveals her desire to feel contrast. Women don't fall for opposites, but they do fall for new emotions. If another man triggers a different sensation in her, admiration, mystery, or intrigue, her body begins to express it. She's not doing it to betray, but to experience that vibration of novelty. And if you interpret it with calm, you can use that awareness to your advantage, to reclaim the leadership of your own attractiveness, reminding yourself that desire isn't preserved, it's renewed. The key isn't to compete with her new reflection, but to elevate your own. A strong-minded man doesn't try to regain power by taking it from her. He does it by showing that he continues to evolve on his own. When she sees that you're changing too, not to impress her, but because you're committed to your own growth, she starts to look at you again with respect. And that respect, even if it doesn't lead to reconciliation, leaves you in the right emotional place. If you notice that her external transformation no longer aligns with the rhythm of before, don't interrogate her, just recognize the pattern. Because when a woman starts putting more effort into her appearance, it's not always for the one in front of her, but for the one on her mind. Understanding that doesn't hurt, it frees you. Now, take a pause with me. If what you're hearing is helping you better understand female behavior, this is a good time to stop for a second and support me. Take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and leave your name and country in the comments. I love reading them and knowing where in the world you're joining this community from. If you want, you can also share your experience or a personal insight. Every story you share adds to this space for conscious men growing together. That said, let's get back to the topic, because after her image changes, what comes next has nothing to do with what you see, but with the time she no longer gives you as she once did. When a woman starts redirecting her energy toward another man, time becomes the clearest evidence. It's not just about how many hours she spends with you, but how she manages them. Suddenly, her schedule fills up, her availability shrinks, and the way she organizes her days seems to prioritize everything except the space you once shared. She begins to justify her absences with gentle phrases like, "I've been so busy," "I needed some time for myself," or "I just have too much on my mind." What's changed isn't her work or her routine, it's her motivation. When there's another emotional stimulus in her life, the clock transforms. Every free minute becomes territory for comparison or curiosity. So far, we've seen how a woman first divides her attention, then filters her communication, and later transforms her image. This fourth shift completes the sequence. Time is the visible consequence of everything before it. Because when something or someone occupies her mind, it inevitably fills her calendar. And even if she says things are the same, an attentive man notices that the natural willingness to share is no longer there. Before, she could improvise a meeting. Now, every attempt is met with excuses that sound reasonable but hide emotional distance. The most common mistake at this point is to respond with complaints. Many men interpret the lack of time as disrespect and push to reclaim that space. But every attempt to regain attention through pressure only accelerates the disconnection. A woman who feels monitored or controlled over her time pulls away even more. It's not the schedule that drives her off. It's the feeling of being measured. The mature man, on the other hand, doesn't try to adjust someone else's clock. He adjusts his own. He understands that shared time is the result of interest, not its cause. Here lies a key lesson. When a woman becomes less available, don't see it as a loss. See it as a signal to realign yourself. The space she leaves is an opportunity to reclaim what you might have neglected: your goals, your routines, your social energy, your personal circle. Don't fill that void with anxiety, fill it with purpose. The paradox is that when you reclaim your own time, you project the kind of independence that's most attractive. Behind this change, there's also a natural psychological process. Women reorganize their availability when they want to see how you respond to distance. If you panic, they confirm their power. If you stay calm, they recognize your strength. Deep down, what they're measuring isn't whether you'll wait, it's whether you'll fall apart. And the man who understands this doesn't argue for a spot in her schedule. He builds a life that doesn't depend on her to feel full. Time lost with a woman who's pulling away isn't truly lost if you use it to strengthen your frame. Because in the end, the one who knows how to manage his own time will never have to beg for anyone else's. And when you learn to notice her reduced availability without victimhood or anger, you're ready to see the most invisible yet deepest change of all, her emotional energy. When a woman begins to disconnect, the first thing that disappears isn't her body, it's her energy. You can still see her, still talk to her, but the warmth that once filled every interaction is gone. It's an absence that words can't explain, because what changes isn't what she does, but how she does it. Her tone becomes neutral, her gaze more distant, her affection more restrained. It's as if she's turned off the inner light that once made you feel welcome. That emotional withdrawal is the ultimate sign that something within her is shifting toward another place, toward another source of validation or desire. With that in mind, we can see that the loss of shared time is only the prelude to this deeper stage. A woman who no longer shares her emotional energy isn't necessarily in love with someone else, but she is redirecting her emotions toward a new expectation. Emotional energy is the most valuable currency in a relationship, and when she stops investing it in you, it means she's saving it for another bet. The difference between the man who notices it in time and the one who doesn't is awareness. A man who mistakes coldness for stress or exhaustion refuses to see the obvious. Emotions don't fade from fatigue, they fade from displacement. The most common reaction to this coldness is trying to rekindle what's been lost through affection or gestures that once worked. However, when a woman has already disconnected emotionally, those efforts no longer reach her. Because what's withdrawn isn't her love, it's her need to feel understood by you. In her mind, she's no longer seeking validation within the relationship, she's seeking it elsewhere. That's why any attempt to insist, reason, or convince her only reinforces her sense that you don't understand her inner process. The mature man, on the other hand, senses the change and doesn't cling. He knows you can't hold on to what no longer vibrates with you, and that the only way to regain energy is through detachment. His strength lies in not begging, because he understands that emotional connection can't be forced, it must be inspired. A woman may disconnect out of confusion, but if she sees a man remain composed and free of drama, she can look at him again with respect. Because in the middle of her uncertainty, masculine calm becomes a beacon. At this stage, it's crucial not to fall into moral judgments. Don't judge her, and don't judge yourself. Relationships don't end because someone's bad. They end when the dynamic stops feeding admiration and desire. If she no longer looks at you the same way, your job isn't to beg her to. Your job is to rebuild yourself so that her eyes, or someone else's, can once again see value in you. Her emotional withdrawal isn't a punishment, it's a reminder. It's telling you that your attention needs to return to the only place where you always have power, your own center. If you can read this stage without resentment, you'll understand that every connection is a mirror, and when that reflection fades, it's time to turn your own light back on. And that strength, that calm that comes from learning to let go, is what prepares you for what's next. How to act in the face of all these changes without losing your frame or your essence. At this stage, the essential question is no longer why she changed, but how you respond to those changes. Most men fall apart when they sense distance because their self-esteem depends on female validation. But a man who understands his worth doesn't define himself by the attention he receives, but by the stability he maintains, even in moments of uncertainty. When a woman begins to grow cold, you don't need more effort, you need more presence. The automatic reaction of someone afraid to lose is to overcompensate, call more, demand answers, prove his love. The mature response, however, is to pause. To take distance in order to regain perspective. Not to punish her, but to remind yourself that no one can take your peace unless you hand it over. In the previous chapters, we saw how she divides her attention, changes her communication, transforms her image, reorganizes her time, and withdraws her emotional energy. All of that belongs to the realm of what you can't control. But what you can control is your mental and emotional frame, the way you interpret reality and the posture from which you respond. Your mental frame isn't arrogance or indifference, it's calmness. It's knowing your value doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's desire. When you act from that place, a woman perceives a kind of steadiness that no explanation can match. And, paradoxically, when you stop trying to win her back, she often starts looking at you with renewed curiosity. The secret lies in understanding the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is emotional, impulsive, it seeks to ease fear. Responding is conscious, strategic, born from inner mastery. If you feel hurt, don't look for comfort in the person who caused your imbalance. Find grounding in your routines, your goals, your male circle. When a man loses his center, his world becomes a reflection of others' chaos. But when he regains it, his calm alone communicates more than any words could. There's something deeply attractive about a man who doesn't negotiate his peace, not because he's cold, but because he's clear. Women feel that stability as a form of emotional protection, and it's in that energy that mature attraction takes root. You're not here to beg her to stay. You're here to show that you can stand tall even if she walks away. That's the difference between dependence and leadership. Use this moment as training. Every time she pulls away, she's giving you an opportunity to strengthen your detachment and self-worth. Learn not to confuse control with leadership. Control is driven by need. Leadership is grounded in serenity. Control tries to change the other person. Leadership inspires respect. If you can maintain your emotional structure without giving in to the urge to rescue her, you begin to build the kind of presence that leaves an impact, even when the connection cools. And never forget this: when you stop chasing validation, you start attracting authenticity. There's nothing more powerful than a man who doesn't react to chaos because his inner world is larger than any external circumstance. And when you reach that point, even a loss ceases to be a tragedy. It becomes fuel for growth. And that's exactly what defines the final step of this process: how to turn loss into true evolution. When a woman changes, a man's ego usually shouts before his reason does. He feels replaced, compared, forgotten. But the truth is, no woman's change has the power to destroy a man who knows who he is. What truly hurts isn't losing her, it's losing the sense of identity that comes from having placed too much of yourself in that connection. Maturity begins when you understand that every person who leaves doesn't take away your worth. They only reveal which parts of you still depend on someone else's approval. Instead of asking, "Why did she do this to me?" ask, "What is this trying to teach me about myself?" That's where real growth begins. After seeing how she divides her attention, becomes selective, changes her image, her time, and her energy, it's time to turn that awareness into wisdom. The first transformation happens within you, realizing that what you now feel as loss is actually the exact point where your new version begins to take shape. Pain isn't your enemy. It's the teacher that forces you to reclaim responsibility for your own value. When you accept that lesson, you stop blaming and start creating. Because a true man doesn't try to go back to what was. He uses the experience to strengthen himself and raise his standards for who he allows to share his peace. The next step is to build purpose. If the energy you once spent maintaining that connection is now redirected toward your own growth, the emptiness turns into momentum. The gym, your work, your social circle, your personal projects all become ground for rebuilding. When you focus on evolving without trying to prove anything, your energy changes. You're no longer the man who lost her, you're the man who learned. And even if she never sees it, that shift is felt. Women can sense a man's rebirth not through words, but through the calm he radiates. At this stage, the mature view of loss no longer seeks revenge. You don't need to show her you're doing fine or make her realize what she lost. That need is the last trace of the ego. True growth is shown when you can remember without resentment, speak without bitterness, and look ahead with peace. The victory isn't in her coming back. It's in no longer needing her to in order to feel worthy. Every man who goes through a woman's change faces two paths: reaction or evolution. The first ends in bitterness, the second in freedom. And emotional freedom doesn't come from forgetting, it comes from understanding. Understanding that every bond is a mirror, showing you how ready you are to love without losing yourself in the process. That's the ultimate goal, to love from abundance, not from need. And when you reach that point, something inside you changes forever. You're no longer affected by who stays or who leaves, because you've understood that true power doesn't come from controlling a woman's love, but from remaining whole in any circumstance. That quiet peace, that stability nothing can shake, is the real reward of this entire process. And it's from that new calm that the story finds its closure. Every story of attraction, loss, or change leaves a different mark, but the final message is always the same. You can't stop a woman from changing, but you can decide who you are in the face of that change. The 5 shifts we explored aren't signs to blame her, they're opportunities to understand yourself. Every time a woman pulls away, life gives you a chance to ask whether you stopped leading your own path, handed your peace over to external validation, or forgot to protect your energy as something sacred. Understanding that turns pain into clarity. True masculine power isn't measured by how many women you can keep, but by the calm with which you walk even when one leaves. The man who learns to read these signs without losing composure becomes magnetic. His calm projects something that can't be faked: self-control, dignity, and purpose. And when a woman senses that, even if she's no longer interested, she respects it. Because emotional maturity is the universal language of attraction that goes beyond fleeting desire. If you've made it this far, I thank you sincerely. This space exists for men who want to grow with intelligence, respect, and integrity. Every video, every conversation, every reflection has one goal: to help you build relationships where attraction and trust coexist in balance. If you value this content, I invite you to subscribe, like, and leave a comment with your name and country. I always read what you share, and every message reminds me that this community grows because of you. Thank you for being here and for choosing to turn your experiences into wisdom. See you in the next video.